These are all of my powders, my powder foundations, my setting powders, my loose powders, my pressed powders, my touch-up powders, everything. I do have a lot compared to other categories in my collection, but I use powder on a regular basis. There are quite a few here that I do want to get rid of. I've just tried them all and some of them just don't work for me at all. So I have a couple products here that are actually almost finished and I'm going to keep them and use them up. The first one is from Tarte. It's the Confidence Creamy Powder Foundation. I'm in the shade Fairlight Neutral, and this is a good shade match for me. I like using this to set my foundation. It's not high coverage enough to be a powder foundation on its own. It is really nice though if you have trouble with powder foundations looking gross around your nose, like around your blackheads. This one doesn't do that. It is expensive for a powder foundation. I probably wouldn't buy it again, but I do want to hold on to it and finish it up since I already am so close to being done. Another one is the It Cosmetics CC Plus Airbrush Perfecting Powder. I have already hit pan on this, and I don't love this around my nose. This is one of the powder foundations that cakes up really not cutely around my nose. I'm in the shade Fair if I didn't say it earlier. I use it sometimes to set my eyeshadow primer. I use it on my cheeks. Sometimes I'll use the Tarte Powder Foundation on my T-zone, and then I'll use this on the outside of my face just so that I'm using both of them. So I'm gonna use it up and then probably not repurchase it. I used to really love this, and I don't know if something has changed or if I just waited too long to use it, but I just don't love it as much on my skin now as much as I used to love it. Couple more that are almost done. This is from Hourglass. It's the Diffuse Light Ambient Lighting Powder. This one is also almost done. I use this to set my under eyes sometimes. I use it to set my eyeshadow primer. It's okay. I don't think it's worth the money for me personally, so I'll use it up and then probably not repurchase it. And the last one that's almost done is by It Cosmetics again. It's the Bye Bye Pores Airbrush Silk Pressed Finishing Powder. It's translucent. And I used to really like this a lot, and I don't exactly remember why. I used to use it to touch up my T-zone, and I went back to do that again, and I don't know if the formula's changed or what, but it just doesn't really look that nice. It definitely pulls very light on my skin, even though it's translucent. It's still got like a pigment to it in my opinion. So whenever I put it on my skin, it lightens everything up, and if I have any noticeable pores or anything, it'll fill them in white. It's not cute. And it can also make my skin look really dry, so I don't know. I'm gonna find a way to use this up. I'm gonna probably, I'm really curious to repress this type of powder because I've never repressed like a translucent silky powder like this before, and part of me is just curious to see how it will repress, if it will change the formula or if it'll make it the same. So I'm gonna repress it and see if it's different and then use it up that way. I have this Besame Brightening Vanilla Rose Powder. It's also a translucent powder, but it's got kind of like a pinky tint to it. And this one I use to set under my eyes. It doesn't actually pull pink once it's on your skin. It's just a really pretty brightening powder. And so I use this to set my under eyes. I do really like it. I'm gonna keep this one, but I don't want to keep this one here. This is the Brightening Vanilla Powder. This one has a more of a yellow tint to it. And this one, the yellow definitely does pull on my under eyes and make them look very yellow, and I don't like it. They also have a violet version of this, a purpley one. I've already used that one up. I like that one too. This is the only one that I don't like, so I'm going to pass this one on. This is the Catrice Prime and Fine Mattifying Powder. It's a waterproof and translucent powder. I use this to touch up throughout the day. I was just looking for a really affordable powder product that was translucent and had a mirror so that I could keep it in my backpack, and this is what I have in my backpack now. It works fine for that. It's great for touch-ups. I enjoy it, and I'm going to keep it in my backpack. I have this Tarte Amazonian Clay Full Coverage Airbrush Foundation Powder. I'm in the shade Fair Honey. This one is halfway done, and I'm just gonna keep it and use it up. I really haven't been into powder foundations lately, so the powder foundations I do have, I haven't used them very often, but I still like them and I still feel like I will use them eventually. I kind of just like fall in and out of these habits. Right now I'm really loving liquid foundation, but I'll probably come back to powder foundation at some point. So I'm gonna hold on to this one. This is a e.l.f. Personal Blend Foundation. It's SPF 15. I have the light version. If you can see on the bottom, beige, porcelain, fair, and light. And I've already used up the one in porcelain. That's the one that matched my skin color, and I haven't ever really used the other three. I thought I would find a way to mix and match them and make it work, but I just don't think I'm going to. This is several years old. I don't even think they sell this anymore on the e.l.f. website, so I'm gonna declutter this one. This little Bite Beauty box here holds a bunch of packets from a brand called Meow Cosmetics. I have, I think, 6 powder foundation shades, a finishing powder, a highlighter, and maybe a blush or 2. I filmed a first impressions with these, and I want to use them a little bit more so I can give you a thorough review of whether or not I think they're worth trying. I bought a bunch of little like dollar samples from their website. They have 86 different foundation shades, and they have a lot of olive undertones for fair skin, which is what I look for when I look for foundation. So I did want to give them a try. I only purchased, they have like 3 different levels of coverage, and I think I only bought the light coverage powder foundations. I should have purchased like more of the coverage options to test them out, but I really was just trying to look for which shade matches me. All of the shades actually work because it is a light coverage foundation. I think it's a really interesting brand that I don't hear a lot about, so I'm going to test these out some more and finish that video for you. I have a Laura Geller powder foundation here. It's the Baked Balance and Brighten foundation in the shade Porcelain. It's kind of got like a marble look to the powder, and it is really pretty, but I think it's just too light for me. If you can see that on my finger, it just, I don't know. Whenever it's on my skin, it looks a little bit dry, and I've had it for so long and I've never used it. Whenever I do try it, I don't think it looks that good on my skin. I think it's just too light and too powdery, and just not a fan of this, so I'm gonna declutter this one. I have a mini of the Bare Minerals Original Matte Foundation, and this is in the shade Fairly Light, and I used up the matte version of this. Yeah, there's original and there's matte. I used up the matte one already. This one is a little bit too deep for me, and it's a little bit too yellow. And I think that's what always keeps me from wanting to use it. It's just a little bit off with the shade, and it is something that I have to buff into my skin, and so I think I'm gonna get rid of this one as well. This was part of like a value kit a long time ago, and even though I did like the matte version, I think that shade, I don't remember if it was also Fairly Light or what, but that one matched me a lot better than this one did, so I'm going to declutter this. I have 2 powders here that are newer to my collection. This is the Urban Decay Velvetizer powder. It's just a really finely milled, thin, translucent powder, and I honestly think it's so beautiful and buttery and finely milled. It feels so silky between my fingers. I love using this as a setting powder. I have yet to use it like mixed in with my foundation. I know that was like a big thing whenever it first came out. You mix it in and it would mattify any foundation. I don't really have much use for that, but I do love it as a setting powder, so I'm definitely keeping this. Same with the Hourglass Veiled Translucent Setting Powder. I do not care for the packaging for this. Whenever I use setting powders, I like to dump a little bit in the cap and then use that to set my face with like a big fluffy brush. And this one, I can't do that. Normally there isn't as much powder like sitting in the top like that, but I recently moved and I'm sure it just got a little bit jostled around while I was transporting it. But it's a really pretty powder. I honestly think that the Velvetizer from Urban Decay is even more finely milled than this one. I think it's a pretty product. I haven't used it enough to have like a fully formed opinion. The packaging is not my favorite, but that's not going to keep me from using it, so I'm going to use this for a little bit longer and see if it's something worth keeping. I have a powder here from Physicians Formula. It's the Mineral Wear Talc Free Mineral Face Powder in the shade Creamy Natural. This one also sort of has like a marbly design to it, and I think it is really pretty. If it matched me, it would be a nice face powder, but it's just a little bit too dark. It's not dark enough to be a bronzer, but it's definitely too dark for my skin. So if it was a little bit darker, I'd keep it as a bronzer because it is a really pretty formula, but it just doesn't match me and I can't make it work, so I'm going to declutter this. I have a container of the RCMA Original No Color Powder. I have a little bit of it in this mini Laura Mercier mini powder container. I just prefer using this on a regular basis, so whenever this is empty, I refill it with the RCMA powder. I think this is a pretty powder. I don't love it as much as the Velvetizer, but it is a good translucent setting powder, and I will definitely hold on to this and use it up. And lastly, I have a Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Skin Perfecting Micro Powder. I'm in the shade 1 Fair, and this is really pretty. I use it to set my under eyes. I sometimes use it to touch up throughout the day. I think it's a really pretty powder. I don't understand the hype that it gets. It gets a lot of hype for being like the best powder out there, and it's such a good quality, and I just think it's okay. I'm gonna use it up. I think it's really pretty for under the eyes. I do think that it doesn't accentuate dryness. If you do have dry patches or you have dry skin in general, this isn't gonna make it look super gross. So I can see the merit in that, but I just don't know if this is worth, I think I paid like $40 for this. I don't know if it's worth $40 for just a translucent powder. So I'm gonna use it up and most likely not repurchase it. So these are the powders I'm going to keep, and these are the ones I'm decluttering. I think 4 of them are almost finished, so by the time I finish those, my collection will shrink quite a bit, but I'm getting rid of almost a third of my powders. I don't think that's too bad, especially since these are all powders that I don't really love or reach for, and now I'm just kind of narrowing it down to the ones that I will use on a regular basis. I go through powders pretty quickly, so I'll probably try some new ones out next year once I finish a couple of these, but I do really love the Velvetizer. This is probably one of my favorite setting powders I've ever used, but I'll work on some of the other ones and then probably just go back to using this one only because this one is really, really nice.